All right, today we're diving into what is, without a doubt, one of the most dangerous hours in a new mother's life. It's this incredibly intense period of risk that happens, right after the absolute joy of birth. So let's get right into it.
So what exactly is this critical moment? It's not the 9 months of pregnancy. It's not even all those hours of contractions. Nope. It's this really brief, super intense window of time that happens right after delivery. And it's a time when, believe it or not, a celebration can flip into a major medical emergency in just a matter of seconds.
Okay, so this period has a name. It's called the third stage of labor. You can think of it as the grand finale, really. It's when the body delivers the placenta. Now, that might sound pretty straightforward, but this is exactly when the risk of really serious bleeding, what doctors call postpartum hemorrhage, is at its absolute highest.
So, here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll define the problem, postpartum hemorrhage. Then we'll get into what causes it, the 4 T's. After that, we'll look at how medical teams respond, what happens when things get even more complicated, and finally, we'll talk about the big takeaway, why skilled care is just so important.
All right, first up, the problem. Let's define what we mean by postpartum hemorrhage, or PPH as you'll often hear it called. What exactly makes it an emergency?
So, the official definition is a blood loss of 500 milliliters or more after a vaginal delivery. Now, to give you a sense of what that looks like, that's about the same amount of liquid as a pint glass. Losing that much blood, or even more, is a huge red flag that something is wrong and needs immediate, serious attention.
But when that blood loss goes over 1,000 milliliters, that's a full liter, we're in a whole different league. This is what's called a major hemorrhage. And at this point, the body is really struggling to keep up. The mother's heart rate can just spike, her blood pressure can totally plummet, she can go into shock. This isn't just serious, it's a life-threatening emergency. It's the moment the medical team kicks into the absolute highest gear.
So what's actually causing all this dangerous bleeding? Well, in a super high-stakes situation like this, doctors don't have time to guess. They need a fast way to figure out the problem, and for that, they use a really clever little memory aid, the 4 T's. These 4 T's stand for tone, trauma, tissue, and thrombin. But here's the thing, they're not all created equal, not by a long shot. As you can see, just one of them, tone, is the cause in a whopping 70% of cases. I mean, that's huge.
So, what on earth is tone? Well, it's short for uterine atony. See, after the baby is delivered, the uterus, which is basically this giant, powerful muscle, is supposed to contract, to clamp down really hard. And that action is what squeezes shut all the blood vessels where the placenta used to be. But if it doesn't contract, if it stays kind of boggy and soft, those vessels are just left wide open. It's literally like a faucet that's stuck on full blast.
Okay, the next T is tissue. This is when little pieces of the placenta or membranes get left behind inside the uterus. And what happens is these leftover fragments physically get in the way. They block the uterus from being able to clamp down all the way, which, again, leaves those blood vessels open and just bleeding.
And that brings us to the last 2 T's, trauma and thrombin. Trauma is pretty straightforward. It means there's been some kind of physical injury, like a tear in the cervix or vagina during the delivery. Thrombin, on the other hand, is all about the blood itself. This is when the mother has a problem with blood clotting, so her body just can't make the clots it needs to stop the bleeding, even if everything else is going right. Okay, so we've got a handle on the problem and what causes it. So, what's the solution? Well, the medical response to PPH is fascinating. It's not about panic. It's about a calm, super coordinated, and incredibly fast protocol. It really is a race against the clock.
So the first response follows this really clear set of steps. First thing, call for help. Get more hands on deck. Immediately, someone starts massaging the uterus from the outside, pretty vigorously, to try and physically force it to contract. At the same time, they're giving powerful drugs called uterotonics to do the same thing chemically. IV lines are going in to pump in fluids and blood. The goal is simple and urgent. Stop the bleeding and stop it now.
And this is what's so crucial to understand. This isn't guesswork. It's not just making it up as they go along. Medical teams follow these incredibly strict evidence-based flowcharts. It's like a playbook that guides them through every single decision, making sure nothing gets missed when the pressure is on. This is exactly how they take a chaotic, scary situation and turn it into a controlled, step-by-step process.
But what happens when those first steps just aren't enough? What if the bleeding just keeps going? Well, this is when things get even more serious, and where modern medicine has some pretty advanced and sometimes really dramatic tools up its sleeve.
Yeah, medical teams have a whole other level of interventions they can turn to. They can use something called a Bakri balloon, which they inflate inside the uterus to put direct pressure right on the bleeding site. There are special surgical stitches called compression sutures. They can even go in and block the arteries that feed blood to the uterus. And, as an absolute last resort, if nothing else works, there's the final, life-saving option of a hysterectomy.
Let's take a closer look at one of those techniques, the B-Lynch suture, because it's really clever. What a surgeon does is they essentially use a special stitch to wrap up the uterus, almost like you're tying a set of suspenders around it. This physically squishes the whole muscle together, and that pressure mechanically squeezes those open blood vessels shut. It's a pretty amazing idea.
Now, there's another complication that's super rare but absolutely terrifying. It's called uterine inversion, and it is exactly what it sounds like. The uterus literally turns itself inside out. Now, thankfully, it's rare. We're talking maybe 1 in every 20,000 deliveries, but when it happens, it's an all-hands-on-deck emergency that can cause massive bleeding and shock fast.
And as you can see here, it can happen to different degrees. It might be just a little dimple at the top, or in the most extreme cases, the whole uterus can end up outside the body. The treatment has to be immediate and, well, very direct. A skilled doctor or midwife has to physically push the uterus right back into place, as quickly but also as gently as they possibly can.
So, when you look at how complex these emergencies can be and how sophisticated the responses are, what's the big picture lesson here? Well, that brings us right to our main takeaway.
Here's what it all boils down to. Postpartum hemorrhage is a huge, huge threat. But, and this is the important part, it is absolutely manageable. Having a system for rapid diagnosis, like the 4 Ts, and combining that with well-rehearsed protocols and a skilled team, that's what makes all the difference. That's what turns a potential tragedy into a controlled event. It's how modern medicine uses this incredible toolkit to save a mother's life.
And that really leaves us with one last big question. We've seen just how incredible the systems and the skills are that exist to manage this most dangerous hour. So the real question, the one we should all be thinking about, is this. How do we make sure that every single mother everywhere in the world has access to the kind of skilled care that can turn this potential tragedy into just a manageable event?